on behalf of Huthwaite and also LinkedIn, who are supporting us in this event. Welcome. It's a fantastic topic that we have today. It is on everyone's agenda. Following our very successful Future Forums last year, we had fantastic feedback about those and also some recommendations around topics, and this was certainly one that was up there. So it's great to be able to bring this to you. We have a fantastic panel that are going to talk with you today, and I'll go through a little bit of housekeeping in a minute. I just want to touch on an example that was published in Forbes a couple of months ago, and it was based on some research that Cognate Research and LinkedIn in the States had done on high net worth individuals, so investors. And they interviewed over 3,000 of these individuals, and they wanted to understand their use of social media. 92% of them used social media on a weekly basis. However, only 4% of them actually interacted with an advisor on that platform or any social platform. However, 54% of them said they would if their advisors were actually active in social media. And of those 90% that use it weekly, almost 60% don't have an advisor. So what a great sales opportunity that is, and a great example just in the financial markets of the potential of social media and social selling. And that's just one of many examples that we've seen in our research and investigation in this space. So what are we going to cover off today? I'm going to just give a little bit of an introduction, some overview of some research of not only ours but also other organisations in this space, because I think there's some really good information out there. And that's just to get people thinking and also get our panel warmed up for what they're going to get into. It's funny, it's only recently you would think in these events we'd be asking you to put your mobile phones away, don't play with your tablets, please don't put a laptop up. However, now in these events we encourage you to have your mobile phones out and your tablets as well as your laptops. We have a hashtag for this event, as you can see up there. Laura Callow, our marketing manager, is monitoring that, so if you've got any questions as well that you want to put through that, please feel free. That would be fantastic if you use that. And we look forward to some really interesting interaction through Twitter. In 2011 and 2012, Huthwaite undertook a very significant global study into buyer behaviour and changes. And that involved over 6,000 people, a whole range of mediums, from interviews with sales and marketing leaders, buyers, academics in the space, a very, very broad cross-section. And from that we have produced a very, very popular white paper as well as a video documentary on what was happening out there. We then ran a couple of what we call pulse surveys last year, where we go back to the market and just test what things are going on and what are changing. And we saw some significant changes last year just in between Q2 and Q4. And there are three things in particular of interest that came up around topics of quite considerable change. And the first was around buyers engaging later and also not engaging sales until well and truly through the process. The second was around social media and how much was being used by professionals in helping them around decisions and investigation. And then the last was a really important one. It doesn't matter whether it's about face-to-face or whether it's through any digital medium, is being able to create value and insights and commercial acumen that salespeople and business development people need to be able to do in any interaction. So there was quite a considerable change. So 6% in the first one. There's some great data around this. The Forrester Research Group say that about 70% of a purchasing transaction is complete before sales gets involved. The Corporate Executive Board have it around 60%. And that's very consistent with what we're seeing as well. And I think a lot of you would also agree that the dynamics around that are changing and will continue to trend upwards. For the second point, it was really only a matter of time before the activities that people use in B2C moved into B2B. I mean, after all, business people are consumers. So this was going to bleed across into B2B and is doing so at a rapid rate and will continue to trend this way. Then the last and really one of the most important things is about how you create insight and value and how you differentiate yourself. There are so many different touch points that you can go to a customer with and your competitors, and being able to stand out, whether it's in a face-to-face conversation or through a digital medium, and differentiate yourself and create value is absolutely critical. And it's an incredible skill to be able to do that. And these are also very relevant to the topic that we're covering off today. There's a lot of change and upheaval going on out there, some great data, and this updates to the minute and it changes. And as I was going through this morning, Matt Loop from LinkedIn gave me the updates on where we're up to. But when I put this together earlier on, there was around 200 million users of LinkedIn. What are we up to now, Matt? 225 million. So and that is just up on just what you see up there, the 13 million increase from November last year. It's a lot. By the end of this session, over 7,500 new LinkedIn members will be created. So Matt Loop, who heads up the sales effort here for LinkedIn, has done a great job. I'm not sure if there's anyone here that can contribute to that, so he can go back and say that he's contributed to that number. 181,000 people have on their Twitter profile that in their bio that they're involved in social media, and that is up from 16,000 in 2009. So it's an incredibly growing space. 2 people per second join LinkedIn. 200 million active Twitter users per month. And a really powerful piece of data, 33%, the number who ended a relationship online because they thought they were being bombarded. So content is absolutely critical, particularly with so many users out there. As part of our research, we went looking for other data in the marketplace, and it wasn't hard to find. What I want to share with you around the situation in the social selling space came from the Sales Management Association, a survey from last year. And they have some really powerful numbers. 96% of sales and marketing leaders believe their teams use LinkedIn at least once a week. 80% believe their sales force would be far more effective and productive if they used it. Greater than 50% expect to increase their engagement in the key platforms of Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook. However, 66% of firms do not have a social media strategy for the sales organisation. So you think about the numbers of users out there in the sales organisation and those that are working without a framework, without guidance. We had our own hypothesis around this, and then this was supported with other findings that we came across. So the Altimeter Group in the US, 11% of companies, only 11% had a formal strategy for sales for their efforts, compared to the marketing organisation, which had 82%. Sales and marketing alignment is always one of these great nirvanas, and it's often talked about, but as you can see from these numbers, it becomes very hard to actually get alignment when that type of thing is actually going on. The bigger problem. This is also from the Sales Management Association, and those sales leaders, and there was around 380 organisations that took part in this study of the leading organisations in the US. They believe their sales force lacked a solid understanding of social media. They thought that their customers were actually far more sophisticated than they were, particularly their key customers, in their social media strategies. And one of the most telling of all of the problems around this was around training. So they were asked a question: have you received appropriate training? And 68% either strongly disagreed or disagreed. So almost 70% of people don't believe they have been trained anywhere near the level that they need to be able to effectively operate as sellers and marketers. That's a huge number, and it's also something that's really, I think, hitting a lot of organisations about what do they do about this. The next thing that we looked at was, what are some of the implications? And there was a great study put out earlier this year by the B2B Marketing Outlook report. It's a fantastic report. It's a domestic report here in Australia, but very much worth the read. And one of the things that they found around satisfaction or dissatisfaction in social media, there were 3 areas that came out as glowing issues. That is lead nurturing, lead generation, and also, to a lesser extent, cross-selling and upselling. So you have a great deal of people that aren't satisfied with the training they're getting. You've got a whole group of people out there who have probably never been very effective in the traditional face-to-face selling environment. They've been just as ineffective in the social sense. However, obviously in a face-to-face sales call, if it doesn't go well, often it's laughed about and can be forgotten. With social media, it's there forever and it's there for everyone to see. And it doesn't just affect the personal brand of the individual, but obviously the company brand as well. So this is a huge risk for organisations. And I know a couple of our panellists have some really good insights into this and what their organisations are doing to address this issue. This also further challenges the roles of sales and marketing and the alignment that needs to be there, because from this you can see that the marketing organisation is not very happy with the sales organisation at all, which causes further issue and further challenge. But why does it matter? And I gave that example at the beginning from the Cognate Research and LinkedIn. The Aberdeen Group also have done some great research around this, and whilst these social selling remains a bit of an ambition for a lot of organisations, change is already underway. So there are people actually already doing it and doing it well. And here's some data on those that are actually doing it well. So those are the performance benefits of social selling. So from a team attainment of quota, 64% as opposed to 49%. Fantastic result. Customer renewal rates, 55 versus 48. Sales forecasting accuracy, 54 versus 42%. You can actually go down to a table downstairs here and have better odds than 42% than forecasting. So you're often better going down to the baccarat table and just having a punt. You'll probably come out better than with some of the forecasting that goes on out there. And I'm looking at my boss as I say that, as he's nodding his head. And the percentage of sales reps achieving quota, 46 versus 38%. So some really powerful data. So there is a difference that can be made, and there's great opportunities there for those that execute well. That sounds a little bit doom and gloomy, but there's actually always some good news around this. So for sellers, you don't have to make a decision to be involved in social media because your customers already made that decision for you. You have no choice. The skills that are required both in a face-to-face interaction and through any medium on social are the same. So I said those same sellers who are doing well out there, you'll find, and we're finding, would be just as effective using social mediums as part of their micro-marketing efforts, prospecting and nurturing opportunities. Of course, those that don't fit into that good part of the bill are going to struggle, and probably struggle greatly, even more so in this area. So, what does it all mean? We've got a fantastic panel here who are going to allay your fears. They're going to calm your nerves after seeing some of that data, but they'll also probably frighten you just a little bit as well with some of the things that they're seeing out there. So what I would like to do is introduce our panel and welcome them up here. Firstly, Huthwaite's CEO and President, John Golden. John's been with the organisation for over 5 years now. He comes from an incredible pedigree in sales and marketing and product. He is extremely passionate about what we do and how we do it, and he has reinvigorated our research and our studies and our product development through the Huthwaite Centre for Research, and delivering products that are designed to address the capabilities that organisations require to be able to operate in the current environment and the future environment. Next is Matt Loop from LinkedIn. So Matt's got 10 years experience in the technology space. Some of you may have known Matt in his previous life, where he came out here to set up Salesforce.com, so he headed up the commercial sales team there, and now does that with LinkedIn. Tom Skididis. So Tom is one of the pioneers in this space, and he established Asia Pacific's first agency that specialises in B2B social media lead generation. Has an incredible stable of clients, both locally and globally, that he's now working with. He is often used in various forms of media and commentary, so it's great to have him with us. Marie Sornin, who is the Social Media Director of Fairfax. Marie also has around 10 years experience in the digital space, working with clients such as Nestle, Qantas and also Target. She also founded an independent agency called Digital Cuisine, which Digital Cuisine and Marie are working on the Fairfax strategy and executing that strategy across Fairfax and putting it in the position that it is today and keeping it ahead of the curve. Chris Collicott from Deloitte. Deloitte are always renowned for their technology, their innovation and forward thinking, particularly in the space that they're in. Chris leads the digital marketing team, and one of the core challenges that Chris has, and I hope he gets the opportunity to talk a little bit about it, in Deloitte, if you think about the genetic makeup of Deloitte, got a lot of accountants, tax experts, getting these guys comfortable in social media, but giving them the ability to do so, the comfort, removing risk, and getting some consistency across the board. Not an easy challenge for him and for his team. And last but not least, Danielle Damasi. So Danielle is a business etiquette expert, and she works with organisations around developing effective digital business relationships and how to build relationships effectively online and offline. Very well-known speaker. You will see her on a number of TV shows, for those of you who get to watch TV. She's also done a couple of TED Talks on the subject, so she's very, very well versed, and it's great to have her with us as well. So, as I said, we've got a hashtag, please use it. I'm going to start off with a few questions. We do have space for Q&A at the end of this, however we encourage people to actually ask questions during the panel. That's one of the most important things, and to keep the conversation going. If you can't get my attention, Laura, who's going to be roving around, will make sure that she waves the flag loud and visible for us. So, excuse me. I'd like to start with what is social selling, and what exactly is it? John, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Social selling, well, can everyone hear okay? Just checking. Yep. For me, I mean, selling is selling at the end of the day, and social selling really is leveraging the new media available to you, so the new venues to be able to connect with your customers where they are, because I think that's that's all that's really has changed, is that customers have moved to different places from where you used to be able to come to physical networking events like this. You can still do that, obviously, but also there are venues online where your customers are getting together, where they're discussing products and services, where they're discussing the business issues they have, and you have to go and meet them there. But at the end of the day, you still have to know how to sell. So it's the media that has changed. The actual ability to sell, the ability to be able to listen, to uncover need, to develop those needs, those are the same. It's the venues that have changed.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
For me, social selling is a much more scalable and efficient way of doing what a perfect salesperson would do in real life: connecting, sharing information, content, influencing. It's, for me, the process of building brand, growing demand for your products, and generating leads, as you do in real life, but in a much more scalable, efficient way because of social networks, platforms, and viral nature.
Matt, you haven't long been with LinkedIn. You haven't had the feet under the table for long, but what's your thoughts on social selling?
I think it's pretty much table stakes in the sales world today. So I think the two aspects that I think are really powerful about social selling are, similar to what Tom said, connections. So putting to use the most valuable asset that a sales professional has, which is their Rolodex or their connections, and doing so in a thoughtful manner, and ideally opening that up to the greater good of the company, and having more of a collaborative team selling approach. The second is insights. The information that's available in social media that people are putting out in a public forum is unbelievable. So the ability for you to learn more about your customer or your prospect and get much closer to them, to allow you to take a far more thoughtful approach before you actually go and try to speak to them, I think is, it's a data set that's never existed before, and it's an asset and something that everyone should be leveraging if they're not already doing so today.
Marie, where does it sit with social media? Where does social selling sit within social media?
To me, social selling is really about that transformation of the traditional purchase funnel, which was the awareness phase, the consideration phase, through to decision making. That's now changing to a cycle. Once the decision is made, you actually have the new sharing phase, which then loops back into the beginning of the awareness and consideration again. So it's the whole transformation of this traditional funnel into a cycle, and how can marketers and retailers actually take advantage of that by making sure they've got they provide a great experience, great product that their customers will want to share with their connections.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd agree with that, and I think that it's just an ongoing process. It's, as an organisation, what you do. It should be part of the DNA of just doing business, about transacting, communicating in a digital environment. I don't think that you can separate it out of the sales cycle now in that respect. It's just part of what you do in social media now.
And how is Deloitte addressing that? What are some of the things that you guys are doing?
Well, we have over 6,000 employees, and there's a range of activity throughout the organisation. We have some pioneers who are really keen and really identify this as a space, and then we have people that take time who watch and listen more than. What we're trying to do in terms of embedding it deeper and deeper into the culture is actually break down those barriers to entry for employees. So we help to, when we're looking at going to market with a new piece of thought leadership or a point of view, we look to create links that we can share with the business that gets circulated internally on our own social media platforms and via email, etc. And that really helps, and we give people ideas around what they might like to say in that space, and then I think that really helps to foster the thought that they can go out and talk about these things. Yeah.
Is it actually selling, or is it something else, Tom?
So for me, social selling has nothing to do with the actual sale. It's not the sale itself. It leads up to the sale. I think it's a misnomer. It's a great term, social selling, but I think the proper term is probably social marketing leading up to the sale. Because at the sale, the prospect-facing person the salesperson or the BDM has to do their thing. They have to be competent, they have to build rapport. But up until that point, social selling is actually, for me, the process of marketing and sales working together to create the right content, identify the right prospects, share that, influence hearts and minds, and get the person to a nurtured point, the prospect, where that meeting can be secured. At that point, though, you need a sales force that can sell. But up until that point, I see it more as a social selling process that's much more about marketing and insights and influence than it is about sales online. I wouldn't advise trying to sell online per se.
Danielle, how do you create a relationship through that process like that?
It's interesting that you say that it's marketing. I agree with you to a point, but there's so much business just being done online now, where if we're going to be forward thinkers, we have to realise that's where it's going. The sales force is diminishing. A lot of contact is happening through email correspondence, over the phone, obviously, but social selling is growing, and people will follow leads, and that will take them to a website where they will continue to make the decision and potentially buy on there. And to be honest, it's a smart way for businesses. The customers are online already, they're ready to be engaged, and so all you need to engage them and take them to where they will buy online. As far as running a business and being productive and keeping costs down, it's very effective. It is definitely the way of the future, so I have to argue with you there. But it is definitely a part of marketing. People make a decision, but one thing that has been forgotten on this panel already, and I find with all of my clients, or a lot of my clients, forget about, we talk about what we need to do as being good marketers, making sure we're putting a good message out there, making sure that there's a good balance between, conversation and sales and so forth. But what about the person on the other end of the message? Very rarely does that get touched on, and that's something that I talk about a lot, because if you don't, we all talk about, what message should we put out there? What is the message that the other person receives? And I love the point that Adam makes about people that generally in a face-to-face environment are good at selling will be good online, and it's very true, and we're seeing that across the board. And that's because they understand that you don't come into an event like this and walk up to someone, pass them your card and say, so we have products on ABC, these are the benefits. It's not like that. It's about relationship, and it's not a speed networking event, and neither is social selling or social networking as well. So always making sure that you understand who the other person is that are receiving your messages, even if it's the entire population on Twitter. Always understand how it's been received. And I just want to make one last point on that, is we went to a big conference and we asked, it was huge, there's thousands of people there, and we asked who is at this event to, it was a big networking opportunity to sell a product or sell a service. And I would say 95% of people put their hand up. And then we asked who's here to buy something, and no one put their hand up. And it's a really good reminder that just because you have a platform online, it's not a platform to sell. It is a platform, like we said, for marketing, but there is an opportunity to sell. That's the difference.
I think part of the problem is that whenever you get a paradigm shift, is that you tend to look at things through the traditional prism, through your own traditional prism, and so we will sit here and have this discussion. Is it social selling? Is it social marketing? Is it something in between? Whatever. And it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's being driven by the buyer. And I think that's where the true shift is coming, because the buyer is interacting and looking for things in different ways and wants to be serviced in different ways. And they don't care, honestly, whether they're getting that from a salesperson, from a marketing person, from a customer service person, from somebody out of the product department, from your janitor, for goodness sake. They don't care. As long as they get the information that they need at the right time, and you're engaging with them in the way that they want to be engaged with. So I think I think we have to be careful sometimes, because we can get we can start to be very insular and look inside and start to say, okay, how does this impact us, and how do we reorganize, and do we have to, well, actually, this is a good example, because most times when I talk to organizations about sales and marketing alignment, a lot of them will say, yeah, we have actually nailed sales and marketing alignment. And I say, that's great. So what'd you do? And they say, well, we got sales and marketing together, and we defined, what's a hot lead, What's a cold lead? What's a frigid? What's a warm, lukewarm, slightly warm, just slightly not dead kind of lead? And we defined all of that, and then we defined the handoff from marketing into sales. And so we now have a great process, everybody's bought in. And I always say, well, who was missing from that conversation? They go, well, no, sales and marketing were there. I say, no, the buyer wasn't there. And that's the point, is you got to look at and start looking at what does the buyer want, and we need to react to that rather than kind of get too caught up in kind of trying to understand how does this impact the way that we're traditionally organized.
Can I say something quickly? Agree, John. On a pragmatic level, though, and with my clients, I've noticed this, marketing doesn't really talk to prospects. The CEO often is too busy to speak to prospects. It's prospect-facing people and salespeople that speak to prospects. So they're ultimately the only touch point, or the key touch point with the audience, the buyers. And if they're out there selling actively in a traditional sense, that could undo a lot of that social form fabric that is required, that inside approach, that doctor approach to building a personal brand that is much more than your sales role, but something about the industry. So in a pragmatic way, this discussion is valid, but at the end of the day, when the tire hits the road, it's your sales team and your BD team that speak to prospects. They have to be in the right training mode, the right insight mode. If they sell too aggressively, I think that will undo a lot of the social selling process. But at the same time, they are selling. But in my approach to selling is quite as brutal as anyone's, but it's a different take on the sales approach. It's giving value first, insights, building your own brand in a way that you can sell when you meet them, maybe not just within the social network itself.
There was I ran through some data of how many users there are out there and what organisations are doing about that, but also highlighted the number of organisations that don't have any type of guides or infrastructure in place. Chris, what are the risks here? What's the
There are lots of risks, but none that can't be overcome, I believe. I think there are obviously reputational and brand risks when things go wrong, and I think that's where a lot of people, particularly when they're starting out, that's where they really focus on. It's like, oh, what happens if I stuff this up, and what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to the organisation? I would say to that you know, policies provided by business can help to mitigate, help to get people orientated and understanding what those challenges are. And then guidelines are there. Firms should have guidelines that actually help to enable people to actually break down the challenge, if you like, that they might be seeing and work out how to get started and what the etiquette is, which I think is, you know, obviously your key area. There are risks around personal reputation, but as in all social environments, I think the biggest risk is often people don't see that social media is in fact a public forum. It can feel very isolated when you're sat there at your PC or on your mobile device, and you don't realise a lot of the time what you say there is not a private discussion. If you were to walk into this room today and start speaking, you know, you'd be acutely aware of the 100 or so people in this room. You should be thinking, well, there could be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people listening to what I have to say here, and the same rules apply. So, but I would say the biggest risk is as we're talking about why we're here today, not engaging is your biggest risk, because you miss out on all these opportunities.
What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I think from our perspective, we're the technology platform that a lot of you probably use in a professional context for social selling. So number one, that's imperative for us, is that everyone's got appropriate training. It's extremely important. In fact, all the corporations you represent are LinkedIn's number 2 priority. All of you individually are our number 1 priority. So the member experience has to be at the highest level. Training people to use this in an appropriate fashion for social selling has to be done with every single client. So internal policies and the approach that you need to take, and the word I constantly use is thoughtful. You know, the stat that you showed earlier, which was quite telling, 33% of US internet users said they ended a relationship because there were too many updates. Just because this is a new medium now, as opposed to mass emailing or cold calling, doesn't mean that you can't get just as annoyed by being bombarded by messaging on social media. So, you know, it's brand diminishing when you get sent the same templated mass email once every month from a corporation trying to sell to you, or when you get a cold call at 6 p.m. on your way home from one of the big banks trying to upgrade your account. You can't take this type of mass approach in social media. You've got to have the right strategy in place. You've got to have the right education and training in place.
I just add to that is, you know, one of the big dangers of having a technology platform and having something that's scalable is that, you know, we live today in a culture that promotes easy. You know, everything is easy. You know, there's an app for that. There's a quick way of doing that. You know, we get frustrated if something takes longer than a couple of seconds. So we need to be very careful that, again, that this doesn't become a substitute for actually doing the hard work. And just leveraging off what was just said there is that if you take a physical networking event, if you came to this event and just walked up to people and started randomly telling them, you know, about something you read in the newspaper this morning that has absolutely no context, but you just said, oh, you know, did you see this morning in the newspaper, blah, blah, blah. And yet that's what people do online all the time, is that they just think it's all about volume and they just churn out and put out all of this nonsense, and it just adds to the noise. And yet, if you did that in a physical networking event, you know, you'd soon be the person standing off in the corner on your own, because everybody else would be like, oh, avoid that guy because he's just spouting nonsense. And that's what's happening to people online. So I totally agree, the whole idea of taking a thoughtful approach. You have to add value, and you have to be doing something of value rather than just say, I'm online now, this tool is really easy, you know, I've got Hootsuite working, I'm, you know, got 55 million tweets going out a day. You know, you got to go, you know, like my mother used to actually say to me quite often, you know, if you've got nothing to say, don't say it. And I think that applies, again, in this arena. If you've got nothing of value to say, if you're not adding some context, if you're not adding value to the conversation, don't say it. You know, wait until you've got something of value to say, and be discerning and be thoughtful.
Can I add something just on that point? Because I completely agree. To put it in not so far away terms, remember maybe 10 years ago when you got an email, it was exciting. And if it popped up on your screen, it'd say, you have mail, or maybe even 13, 15 years ago, and it said, you have mail. It was exciting. Does anyone remember that feeling? Anyone remember that feeling at all? Yeah, it was exciting to get email. And you're like, oh, I have email. Or you go away for 2 weeks on a holiday and come back and you've got a couple of emails, and it was awesome. And now we go away for, you know, a 20-minute meeting and come back and we have 200 emails. So that's just something to think about, that not that long ago we were excited about getting some messages in this, you know, new dynamic, that now we're like, oh, another email. Where if it was companies, obviously companies have gotten smarter about sending out updates and so forth, and they've got a lot more purpose with their messages, or some do, or newsletters and so forth. It's just that this is a new dynamic that people are interacting on, that, you know, a few years ago when Twitter started in 2006, so forth, people were just constantly smashing out messages, and people were excited because they're like, look at all this content, look at all my tweets, I'm so tweetable. You know, people are like, tweet me, let's tweet, rah, 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 and it's exciting. It's not anymore. So it's just that, just like emails back in the day, we don't want to be bombarded, and it's gotten a lot more sophisticated. So it's just understanding that there is a shift. So when we were talking about training before, it is making sure that you have updated training, because a lot of the books and so forth, even if they were written 18 months ago, are outdated about the shifts that things are happening, and the clients are sophisticated. So it's a great point.
Maria, you wrote a fascinating paper some years ago under the Digital Cuisine banner about 3 aspects to it. Have they changed since you wrote that?
It's funny you ask that, because I wanted to talk about these 3. That's my secret. I've got 3 words that can guarantee you success in social media. And I wrote that kind of article, I think it was 2 years ago. And I thought, I'm going to talk about it this morning, but I need to revisit and see if it's still working and if it's still really operating that way. And the good news is, yes, it is. I've actually looked at some campaigns recently, and I've reapplied these 3 words, my secret, and I'm going to share it with you this morning. And this secret still works. If you look around at great social media campaigns, and I'm talking about marketing campaigns here, advertising campaigns, how brands have engaged with their audience, their customers, and have been successful at really the holy grail of social media, which is creating earned media. So from a message, from a campaign, how do you generate that conversation? How do you get people to have a reason to share your brand, your message, or your product? So you can go back to Digital Cuisine and read that article, but I'm going to share these 3 words with you. They're very simple. It's very basic. Utility, value, entertainment. When you do put an idea about a social media campaign or you want to operate in that space, I'd always advise my clients, I'd advise you to look at, is what you're doing going to provide one of these aspects, utility, value, and entertainment? And if it is, then you're giving a reason to share to your audience. Whatever it is, it might be something that's really funny, something that's going to bring them value around your product, something that's going to help them achieve a task. And if they've got that, they will use it, and they're more likely to be able to share it. So when I actually came up with these 3 words a few years ago, I looked at some campaigns like, I don't know if you've seen it, but the Burger King Whopper Sacrifice, which at the time was a brilliant idea. Burger King actually offered a way for people to delete their friends from Facebook in exchange of a voucher for a burger. So you'd actually kind of go, we all have friends on Facebook that you're actually not really friends with them. They're just there on Facebook. So you'd go, I'd actually trade that friend for a voucher for a burger. It's entertaining because it's funny. It's got utility. You're actually getting rid of all the friends you don't want to have on Facebook, and it's got value. It gives you a voucher to get a Whopper or a burger. Great. So they've really nailed these 3 aspects on the head. So I thought that was a really interesting campaign. There were some implications where you can't operate in that way specifically on Facebook anymore, but they've really understood these 3 elements of how to make a social media campaign successful. And if you look at more recent examples, I was just looking at the Oaks reverse robbery. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a campaign where Oaks, which is that milk drink, realized that they actually had got out of shelves in a lot of convenience stores, and that people were asking where the product was. So they came up with this campaign, which was a reverse robbery. So instead of going into the utility stores and rob the cashier or whatever, they actually came in and robbed back by putting the product back in shelf. And I think that's also a really nice example of they're providing utility because they're bringing the product back where people want it. They're providing value because they actually went so far to stock people's fridges with their product, so that's great value there. And then from this idea, they also built branded content on that, and because it was executed in a really quirky and funny way, it got spread in the social media world. So, they had over 3,000 requests for reverse robberies. They doubled the number of Facebook fans during that campaign just because they really built that around a really interesting idea. I guess the difficult aspect of that is really understand your consumer insights and what is it that you want to provide with them. And also, all these campaigns that have been successful, they've actually come up with an idea that is very unique, that is very engaging, and it's sometimes groundbreaking. So when I look at these case studies and example, one thing that actually jumps at me is that they believed in these ideas so much that they've gone out without diluting the ideas, without being fearful of going, oh, is that going to work, is that not going to work? So it's really about understanding these 3 elements and then keeping your idea really strong and really pure, not being scared about, oh, maybe we're pushing too far, maybe it's not going to work. You have to really put it out there and make a big bang for it to work. So yeah, this is my secret.
Love it.
I'll just pause there for a minute. Any questions from I just want to see if there's any questions from the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that brings me to my next point. I currently work at Fairfax, which is, as you all know, a big organization and also undergoing a lot of change at the moment in particular. So for me to get into this organization and say, yep, we're going to do social media, the 3 words I was sharing with you before, very simple. Now, looking at that and applying it to Fairfax, very complicated, extremely complicated. So I think the first step for me is really to gather information and understand what's going on. Understand what's going on inside the organization, what type of skills, what type of knowledge, what kind of systems, what do we have that we can or cannot operate in that space with. The second would be really understanding what's around you. What are your competitors doing? What are your partners doing? What's going on in that space that you're operating with, and what's happening particularly around social media in your industry, in your environment, all around you. And then finally, and probably one of the most important points as well, is what are your customers and your audience doing? What do they want from you in that space? Once you have all of that information, then you can go out and start formulating your strategy and really push your objectives and understand what you need to do. When I was looking at that with Fairfax, for example, I looked at different social touch points, and I realized there's about 90% of the Fairfax audience who's also on Facebook. But there's only 24% of that audience on Twitter. So I thought, well, Facebook should be where we concentrate our efforts. Now, when I looked a little bit deeper and I looked at the volume of conversation and the engagement around the news content in particular, Twitter was much, much stronger, a lot higher. The engagement, the conversation, the opinion were a lot stronger on Twitter. But if I didn't go deeper into this analysis, I might have made the wrong judgment on how to build that strategy. So really important that you understand all your context before you go out and start building things, start doing things. So that would be the first step for me on how to start operating in the social media space.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think if you start with your buyer, I mean, that's the best place to start, regardless of whether it's social or whatever. It's go back and understand your buyer behavior. Talk to your current customers, find out, how they want to be serviced now, how they want to get their information, what do they use, where do they go? If they're online, if they're active in social media, where are they? What groups are they in? What's of importance to them? So the first thing is to really understand your buyer and what your buyer is doing, and you can get that information simply by talking to your customers. We do that all the time ourselves. It gives us a wealth of information and has informed a lot of what we do today by directly talking with them. And then the second thing is, once you find that out and you discover that they are active online, they are active in social media, is take a disciplined and patient approach. And this is often the hardest thing for salespeople in general. And one of the things you got to teach them is to listen, right? And it's the same when you go online. Your first period of doing that should be just listening. Seeing what they're talking about, seeing what's of importance to them, seeing what issues there are, and don't immediately jump in and get involved, but listen and understand what's going on before you actually jump in. So those are just two simple things. Is first of all, ask your customers what they're doing and where they're going and what's of importance to them and how they want to be serviced today. And then second off, go and listen and start to understand what's of importance to them, how they're discussing things, what they see as value in these venues.
Tom? Agree with Maria and John. If I can add a more, but a strategic and tactical element to that. If you want some specific advice, I've always been a believer that in B2B, where I specialize in, the spray and pray approach to consumer social media doesn't work for me. Spraying out my content and hoping it meets my targets and comes back to me and feeds my kids just doesn't work. I need to be able to speak to the right people. So one piece of advice I have for you, if you're in B2B, is always start with your prospect list first. In my opinion, go and buy a list, Dun & Bradstreet, Vita, whoever you're going to buy it from, or from your own CRM. Figure out who your customers are, who your prospects are, company name, job title, all that hard data that any good head of marketing, head of sales does. And then map this to social networks. Literally go and map this to LinkedIn's advanced search function, or go to Twitter, use different tools to run searches, and you can actually map social human users back to your actual prospect lists. Now you've got the beginning of the right target to go after. So now there's a purpose, one that your CEO and CFO can instinctively look at and go, yeah, this makes sense. Now that we know that we have 843 CIOs that are on LinkedIn and another 425 CFOs. If we can somehow connect with these people and influence them the right way, let's go. So I recommend the closed loop approach. Sorry, Matt. The closed loop approach to social media from a B2B sense.
I would add to that, the listening piece is really key, particularly when you're starting out. And then start out small, break it down, and really, aside from looking at where your clients are, where your prospects are, also try to think about what the influencers are in that space. Who are the people who are likely to amplify your message? Because those are the ones that probably already have trust in the social media space that you're trying to enter. So understand what's important to them, and by extension, you'll understand to a degree, I think, what's important to their followers, to their readers. So I think those are two key factors. The other piece is, most organisations have a tremendous amount of content, perhaps, that they're not using. So I think, to go back to your point earlier around understanding what's going on inside, trying to map that inside world with the outside world. And social media is it really should start with the giving rather than, the taking. So look for things that you can give out that are of value, that have meaning to your audience and your growing followership.
Can I say another thing about, obviously a great question, because there's lots of comments around it, but I really just need to say this now, but only be where your customers are, even in a growing space. I have so many clients that say, oh, we want to go on Pinterest, and I sit down with them and I go, none of your clients are ever going to be on there. And they think, but it's so cool, we get to pin things. I'm like, that's great, but you go home and you have your own personal account and pin your life away. That's totally fine. So not only is knowing where your customers are, but be very realistic. It's a very exciting new platform that we're playing on, and the more and more that time goes on and developers get very clever, the more and more that they're creating these platforms and tools for us to use in business that are so exciting. And so just keep yourself in check if you're in that position to say, is this a good use of time right now? It's not always great to be an early adopter. In some space it is, say for instance Google Plus and so forth, because then you get more engagement, and anything Google does is always great. But sometimes it is better as far as game theory goes, if anyone's into economics here. Maybe let someone else go first and see what they do, watch, listen, and then see how you can kind of compete or complement in that environment. The same offline, although I do lots of stuff with digital relationships, obviously my background as well comes from face-to-face relationships, and that's where my shift has changed to how do we have effective face-to-face relationships like we have for 50,000 years now on an online forum. But in my face-to-face life, I'm a professional wingwoman, and what that means is I go to events with people that aren't very confident networking, and I help them to have a great event. And it's the same thing. They get really excited about these amazing events that they want to go to. And I say to them, why are you going there? No one is there for you. And they say, but it'll be so cool. There's like rally car drivers, and I just think it'll be a great event to go to. And I say, well, do that in your private time. It has no use for you professionally. So it's just about keeping yourself in check. Things get exciting, and things will get even more exciting. But just make sure that you just step back just for a moment and see if it's a good use of your company time.
I think the panel's brought up some very, very interesting points there, and particularly around the what. We saw some data there about the incredible dissatisfaction around things like lead nurturing, lead generation, cross-selling, upselling. What is it that people need to be able to do? What are the skills they need to be able to have? Is it any different to face-to-face effectiveness? John?
Well, I think this is again, just kind of going back to what I was saying at the very beginning. I think this is a very important point to take away, is that some people make the mistake of thinking, okay, that if a seller, as we saw the data earlier, if sellers or buyers rather are 55 or 60 or 70% through their buying process before they engage with a seller, well then doesn't that somehow reduce the role of the salesperson? Because at that stage, they pretty much made up their mind. And in fact, it's completely the opposite, because if somebody has gone through that process and they've been engaging and they've been getting information from third parties or maybe from your marketing, and they've built up an idea of what they want, it's actually more incumbent on the salesperson that when they do get the opportunity to engage directly with them, that they can go deep fast with that buyer. So the level of business acumen that a salesperson needs now has gone up exponentially, because you need to understand the business of your buyer. You need to understand what's happening in the segment, in the market, what are the dynamics within their organization. You need to have gathered from marketing and from whatever other engagements that have been had with that buyer up to now. You need to get that information and kind of build a composite, because if you engage with the buyer who's 60% through their process and then start asking them about things that have already been covered earlier in the process, or you're misaligned with them, you're going to lose that opportunity. But if you can go deep quickly and you can actually talk to them about the business issues and really show that you have something of value to bring to that conversation, then you have the opportunity to move it forward. So it actually increased the level of sales skills needed and the level of business acumen needed by salespeople.
My agency is currently working with or managing about 24 social sellers for large organizations that report to, senior people. And one of the things that we've discovered is that a social seller, who's usually from a prospect-facing role, sales, BD, needs to be able to form thoughts that are social friendly. In real life, right now, I could stutter, or I could say something stupid, but then we all laugh, I kind of wave my head, and we all forget it, we all get on with it. But in a social network, if you say something dumb or silly or off topic, it's hard to retract that. So that forces people to be reflective, and to be reflective needs mental time to write and think about the needs of your customers. And that takes time away from chasing the commission. And whether it's the salesperson's narrow focus or their boss's narrow focus in terms of the job description they've put on the salesperson, there's also often a conflict between prospect-facing people wanting to engage the market but having the time to do it because of the reflection and strategic thought required. So one of the things we're finding is that the best social sellers are not doing it on their own, but they're engaging marketing, and marketing is playing a key role in terms of helping them with content, maybe editorials, almost like the speechwriters for Barack Obama, helping the president or the salesperson in this case, who's the front-facing brand, to be able to engage by having a sort of backroom, ethical speechwriting backroom that allows them to speak in their own voice, but with a colleague or division that's helping them be able to have the front foot. So if, as a social seller, you don't work with marketing, and if you don't reach out to them, and if you don't engage them and study articles as well, you're not going to make it. And I also see, sorry about this, but a controversial statement in the future, as social selling takes off, I think social selling is one of the most corrosive practices in the sales world, because there's going to be a huge gap between social sellers who adopt this reflective, strategic approach and work with marketing and those who refuse to. A lot of salespeople refuse to work with marketing or hate marketing or think marketing doesn't get it. Well, they do. You have to work with them, and if you don't, you'll end up becoming a dinosauric salesperson and you will lose your job. And social sellers will actually rise to the top. So I actually think that over the next 5 years, 50% of all salespeople, if social selling takes off, will lose their jobs. It's just not feasible. It's not sustainable. I think there's going to be a widening gap. So to everyone here who does sales, I recommend having that thinking now about marketing and working with them and allowing them to help you be able to engage your market.
Chris, Deloitte, all those practitioners, they're all the face of Deloitte. They're all out there developing business. How are you working with them to be more effective sellers?
Well, in all the ways I think that Tom spoke about, it's an ongoing challenge. Ultimately, we've worked on this concept of empower and trust. So give people the training, give people the tools, and then they're a smart bunch of people. They broadly speaking understand the implications, and they're usually very passionate about what they do in their job. So they actually have something to say that they care about. So I think it's helping from a marketing perspective. It's about making the body of the organisation aware of initiatives that are coming up quickly, soon, early, so that they can think and they can start to understand the points of view that are being developed by the organisation, the thought leadership that's going to come out. And then really helping them to, I guess it is a very fine line between marketing helping to construct a message and somebody actually writing the message and being authentic. And ultimately you want to drive that. People can tell on social media when it's coming from the person versus if it's just a broad sort of vanilla message. So it is really about helping those people to speak with their own voice, but then obviously speak in unison to a degree, about having a brand for Deloitte. So it is a challenge. I know it's something that's very dear to your heart. So yeah.
Is there a risk that the marketers favour certain individuals on the customer-facing side, the client side?
I would say we invite people to get involved. So you want people involved that see this as an opportunity. So the risk is that there will always be those people that are blazing a trail, that are leading. But one way that we try to broaden is to provide case studies, to provide feedback into the organisation, so that the light bulb goes on in more and more minds. So, I mean, having that feedback loop, telling the story back internally is so important, so that people can see the value, can see where the ROI is coming from, and see the successes that others are happening, and that they're making it happen. If they can do it, others can do it too.
Marie, Fairfax, obviously there is a range of sales. There's highly transactional through to highly consultative for major buyers and so forth. What's the most effective social, the social or the search side of things? What's more successful in the different types of sale that Fairfax have?
There's a few things that I just wanted to build on, because there's been some really interesting points in what Tom and Chris were just saying. Is that's absolutely what I do on a day-to-day basis at Fairfax, taking an organization that it needs to go through that change at an extremely fast pace. And I think, yes, you need to step back and think of how you want to do it and how you want to operate. And one of the main things that I've done in building a social media presence for Fairfax is bringing everyone to work together towards a unified strategy: editorial, marketing, product, and commercial, with looking at what I call the social media blueprint, which gives the vision, the objective, the direction, the key initiatives, and also the culture for Fairfax to operate in that space. There's a lot of change. So that's really how we've built this initiative and the presence now. Coming back to the search and social, I think there's a lot of things that are happening, and you probably all have seen it in your day-to-day operations, is that both marketers and consumers are starting to use social media as a search tool, as a way for them to inquire about products and help their purchase decision. I've actually seen some research in Europe that says 50% of the 16 to 64 years old have actually used social media to inform their buying decision. That's very new. That wasn't the case before. So it's really about understanding how it works. And Google is the biggest search engine in the world, but do you know which is the second one? It's actually YouTube, which is a social platform full of user-generated content. There's about 1.6 million search done per day on Twitter. So you need to think on how you want to put your products out there, and how you want to use, how visible can you be in the social space. And then there's a lot of research. Google has actually done a very extensive research called Google Think, where they map every single tactics along the customer journey. And social in some industries comes out as helping the awareness phase, and then in some other industries it's later in the purchase funnel. Now, some experts also have told me when I was putting information for this presentation that social kind of closes the loop. To me, between the search and social environment, social is really the validation point. It's what people kind of go to their close connection, their friends, people they trust, to inform their decision. So I think it's coming back to when you operate in that space and when you've built your strategy, it's really combining your search, your social activity with one thing in mind, which is accelerating the purchase funnel. how you're going to use all these tactics to really accelerate decision from your customers into choosing your products.
When people were coming in today and I was talking to people, there was a lot of questions and discussion around return on investment. How do we get management to buy into this? How can we demonstrate the value in that? And you know, we saw some interesting statistics about the lack of value that people see in it, the effort that has to go into it. What are some of the organisations doing around being able to demonstrate a return on investment? Matt, what are you seeing from LinkedIn world?
Well, I'm relatively new in the role, so I've been with the company for about 4 months, but we do have both customers overseas as well as some early adopters in Australia. A variety of things. There's some pretty straightforward hardline metrics that they're looking at, which is on meetings, right? Number of meetings or number of connections that you can make. We actually have a algorithm that we run called Social Selling Index, so we can actually look at an organization's overall adoption, namely of LinkedIn, and give you a score of 1 to 100. So the features you're using, the number of searches you run, the number of connections you have both internally and to the external world, we can come back and say you are an 18 out of 100, right? The way my field sales works, actually we won't even speak to a company under a certain level because they're not in a position or not at the readiness to actually have a conversation, a sales engagement with us, right? They're in marketing nurture and we'll continue to work on them. Those who are over it, you know, one of the outcomes we'll look for is driving that from 25 to 45, so the right behaviors that are helping increase their overall effectiveness on social selling. A lot of stuff with regards to integrating it or tying it into a CRM. So of the opportunities or the meetings that are found through social media, what's actually driving pipeline and closed revenue. Some unbelievable results. Can't disclose who the companies are, but you know, a couple of extremely large global organizations and one very large Australian organization who've made a minimum investment, even in a pilot, where the return's been 8 to 9 figures as far as pipeline goes. So the impact that this can have, if done correctly, and I think to echo one of the other sentiments that's been going around, in unison with marketing, right? Some other data or stats that are out there, I know we're being bombarded with data, but you know, over 75% of B2B buyers, Forrester says it's over 91% of B2B buyers, go to social as the most trusted source of due diligence to get information around products that they want to buy. And then over 60% of the buying process, this is according to Corporate Executive Board, is done before a salesperson even gets their hands on it. Meaning what marketing is doing to talk about your brand in those different channels is hugely important to the ultimate success of a salesperson. So look, a variety of different metrics. I think things that are harder to actually put an ROI on, the speed to actually connect and get walked into a deal. You know, the example I have is that, and this kind of goes to the power of search, finding the right people. One of my reps was doing research on a company, found the right person that he wanted to approach, but then could also be accountable to finding the best path to connect to that company. Saw that someone within LinkedIn was connected to the MD of this organization. So they could take it upon themselves now, leveraging the information in social to find the right person, the right seniority level and function, figure out the best path to connect to that person, the best approach to take, which is through a warm referral. So in talking about, you know, search versus social, the social element is that when you take a cold approach, it's a roughly 3% success rate, right? Cold calling and mass emailing is not successful anymore. It's an old way of doing prospecting. Whereas going through a warm introduction or referral, you know, through someone who we work with, over 50% chance they're going to respond. So went through this trusted intermediary, got the meeting within an hour, and it changes the whole game. The tonality of that meeting and going in off the back of someone who this MD trusts is totally different than, you know, some random salesperson who happened to get a meeting but who has no context or relationship with the end buyer. It totally changes the game. So, you know, that ended up being about a week-long sales cycle as opposed to the traditional SMB sales cycle for us for 5 weeks. So it's accelerating deals, it's helping us connect to people quicker, it's helping get responses quicker. Harder things to necessarily measure, but against averages, what you have for an average deal size, average time of a sales cycle, we're measuring those as well.
Excuse me. What are some of the leading indicators people here can use and take away that people are seeing that, you know, they're on their way to success?
I do think there's always a danger here that we think that we need to create you know, new metrics and new ways of measuring things because the medium or the approach has changed. But if you think about it, we're still in a sales, the ultimate is a sale, right? So we're still in a sales process. So it's still about, you know, have you identified, have you connected with the right person, or have you connected with somebody who can connect you with the right person? Have you identified their role? Have you identified the need? Have you engaged in a conversation that you're progressing? So I think it's great to have new metrics, but I think the traditional metrics, if you like, still hold true, because at the end of the day, if you're going to progress a sale, regardless of whether you do it through a social medium or through a face-to-face medium or a combination of both, it's still about the quality of are you connected with the right person or the right people? Have you identified what their roles are? Have you identified what their needs are? Have you drilled down on those needs? Have you progressed it forward? You know, are you advancing the conversation in a way that's actually leading towards a sale? So I think what we have to make sure is that we still hold the same rigor and we still look for the same things, even if they're being achieved slightly differently, you know, rather than say we've got to create a whole new set of metrics, because at the end of the day, to get a sale, you're going to have to go through a process, and the buyer's going to have to go through a process. It just may be done slightly differently, but the characteristics of that process is still the same.
Sorry, do you want to go? Thank you. If you look as well, when people talk about ROI, people get very narrow thinking about what that looks like and put the charts up on the wall and so forth. It's a very old model. I'm not stating that you need to bring in new metrics at all, but there is a new metric, and it's a very fast metric. And it's Twitter feeds and what people are saying about your company. You can see a change or see a new response to a new ad goes live on TV, and instantly you can refresh your Twitter feed and you can see what the public is saying. Never before have we had this, and not to a full open public. So in the sense of where I concentrate on that micro level of business is around that customer experience. So yes, we've got these amazing strategies and digital agencies that come up with the new brand, the new logo, the new slogan, and what we want our customers to feel. If you're a bank, like some of my clients, we want to be trustworthy and reliable, yet you go on their website and it's clunky, it might break down if there's a new offering and so forth. So that doesn't give you the feeling that they want to portray. So it's kind of like connecting what the big macro strategy is of marketing and making sure that every single touch point that a customer is experiencing your brand is consistent with how you want them to feel. And as far as ROI goes, you can just jump on social media and see instantly the changes. So whenever I go into a new organisation and we start working with all the frontline staff, so we make what we do is make sure that marketing, IT, or anyone on social, anyone sending out emails, letters, that's creating the websites, that anyone on the telephones, anyone that's talking with your customers out in the marketplace, is ensuring that that customer experience is very consistent. Because as soon as in business, if we have a different experience online or on the telephone or on social media, we then won't trust that brand. And once someone doesn't trust you, just like face-to-face, there's no way they're going to buy from you or continue to do business. So it's making sure it's consistent. And so in that respect, as far as ROI goes, so we kind of go in like a secret shopper and see what the reaction or the customer experience really is in the marketplace, on social media, on the telephone, so forth. So then you've got that data. And then we do some work and make sure that all the brands, all the touch points, all the customer experiences are consistent. And then we go straight back on social media and see what they're saying. So those metrics are, although they're great, that have been around for, you know, a long time in business, we can see the responses so quickly now, just by refreshing your Twitter feed. Because every time someone, you know what people are like, look at the people who are on social media. It's generally people between, you know, your 17 to 29-year-olds are the biggest users. They get off a phone from CBA or any of the banks or a flight, and they comment on it, right? We all see it on Facebook, on Twitter. So this is so exciting in this forum that we can see the ROI of what's happening instantly.
I would say as well, I agree with everything that's been said, and I would say if you haven't already, go and have a chat to your digital marketing department, go and have a chat to your IT team and just see what data they already have. And they've probably got analytics tools which can be enhanced or adapted to suit your specific needs, to make sure that those available metrics around engagement with online content and form submissions and etc. to ensure that that is being tracked, so that it may not give you the whole picture. It may only start to tell you the story at the broad end of the funnel, but it's an indication. It will start to point you in the right direction. You know, you can look at what types of organisations are coming to your site. And are those your target audiences? Yes, you won't necessarily know individual people, although that's changing over time with tools like marketing automation tools. But you know, you will certainly get, am I in the right ballpark? Am I playing in the right spaces? And that data is probably available to most of you today when you go back to your offices.
Just a quick comment on the B2B side, guys. For those that need to focus on pipeline, a key tactic you could use is look at your sales team and look at their sales territories, which are often broken up by region or verticals, and ensure that there's alignment between their social activity and their sales territory. In other words, have them connect with and interact with those that they're going to sell to in real life. And by bringing offline sales territory alignment to social, you're now making it real life, and as they go about connecting with these prospects, you can observe that as part of the CRM if they're adding this in, and eventually when a lead takes place and a sale takes place, that can be attributed back to the social program if there is one. So it's both a strategic and a tactical approach to ensuring that offline sales metrics are aligned to social networks, which I agree with my panelists. I think social networks are real life. I don't think they're a digital channel. I actually think they're a sales gateway, a sales and marketing gateway, a temporary little flicker that allows us to connect in a temporary fashion and then meet in person. So I do believe they're real life, and if that's the case, you need to bring real life sales and marketing metrics and processes to social media.
Tom, just on some of the points you made there, are you seeing situations where you are very effective salespeople using social media that are actually generating leads for other salespeople?
Yeah, I was speaking before, thanks, good question, Adam. I was mentioning before that I both fear and expect that as social selling grows, it could create a massive gap between salespeople, and I do think that up to half of any sales team could potentially find themselves in direct opposition to the top social sellers. And one thing that we know is, as a social seller, you're connecting with hundreds of people more than your sales territory. The traditional model is I meet you and I have one relationship. So the number of relationships you build is directly proportionate to the number of meetings you have. And because as human bodies we're very inefficient, if you can only meet 3 people a day, maybe you have 3 relationships. But on a social network, you can connect. People will invite you to connect, you'll invite them to connect, or on Twitter, with hundreds of people every month, maybe thousands, depending on how prolific you are. So the model changes because now, like in my case, I have thousands of connections and there's relationships there. People know me because of my content. And even though we don't have a real life relationship, there's a virtual one where I kind of know them and they kind of know me. There's a familiarity there. So the model is different. I now have thousands of relationships which I can convert into meetings. So if a social seller starts producing content, especially stuff that links back to his or her company website, and that link back produces inbound leads, which then get farmed out to the salesperson right next to me, do I have a claim on that lead? If I'm a salesperson, I report to you, and there's 10 other people who don't do social selling, but I do it, and I produce 100 leads for the company over a year with my social output, of which $8.2 million of business is closed, do I have the right to go to my sales director and say, hey, give me 10% of that, or give me 1% of that? Otherwise, I'm out of here. So it's a corrosive, but in a good way, practice, because it creates massive scale. And as you build massive scale, you've got good problems. Good problems, and how do you harness these people? And if they have the wrong attitude, they might just dump their organization, or they might become prima donnas. The key is to invest in the right people, especially, and make sure that they're aware of potential issues like that, and have a policy in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
To the floor, yeah.
Oh, hi, it's Dennis here on the market. Really good points. I just have one question about risks. I think, from my point of view, I think one of the reasons customers slightly drop this because of risks. You covered on like reputation, internal training, and so forth. How do you advise companies about loss of control of data, the fact that it's not hosted on the company's servers and so forth? Because I think from the experience I've had with customers, a lot of people are hesitant to put this data out into somebody else's server and very risk averse in that regard. Have you come across that, and how do you advise that?
It's a really good question and really relevant and very insightful, because a lot of people kind of think about it when something bad happens and they go, oh, I didn't think about that. So there needs to be an element of trust. So I deal with this a lot. So the change piece, moving every employee from a place of where we used to do business to now on social and digital is a change management piece, and we concentrate on that a lot, sort of changing the behaviours. And what we've found is Twitter's a perfect example. They go, yep, great, jump online, start to build a following, start to build a presence. And so people go in there and say, I work with, can I use your example, your company, I work with Deloitte, my tweets are my own. Little disclaimer, has anyone seen that? My tweets are my own. Means nothing. Absolutely nothing. The same as if I work for Deloitte and come into a networking event and walk in and think that I can just say whatever I want because I work for Deloitte and have a badge on that says I work for Deloitte, my opinions are my own. There's no way that I could walk around to people going, hate your shoes, oh, I hate Delta on The Voice or whatever, and it not link back to the perception that people have about the brand that you work with. Exactly the same. So as far as personal brand goes, you need to ensure that the training is there to know where their boundaries are, just like coming to a face-to-face event. Because when people meet anyone, whatever company that they work for, and you say, I'm Danielle, I work for so-and-so, how you behave and act in that moment, they will link it back to the firm and the value of that firm. And we all see it all the time. Say, for instance, if you walk onto Qantas and the flight attendant is rude, instantly you think, why do I fly Qantas? It's not just that individual person. Exactly the same on digital, and it happens so much. So putting tweets out there that are my own opinion, it always links back to the company. So it has to come down to training, making people aware, showing case studies of where things have gone wrong. And what Adam said right at the front was so good. The difference is when we meet people face to face, we can say things and we might put a foot in our mouth and go, hope they forget I said that. You put it online, it's there forever. So my advice is, like tattoos, right? Don't put anything online that you don't want to see in 5, 10 or 50 years because it's going to stick and it's going to be there. So you need to this is where training comes in. And it also, so they need to know the boundaries, they need to know legally what they're responsible for. They can't hide behind your big brand. It doesn't work. We've all seen it, right? The radio stations, people tweeting and getting fired, and then this big hoo-ha, stocks go down just from one person's tweet. If they say something racist, all right, we've all seen this in the media. So showing them these case studies to give them boundaries. But then, once you are satisfied that you have trained them, then you need to let them go and you need to trust your staff, just like you would coming into a networking event. You know that, yep, you can go to that networking event because you're going to act appropriately. You're not going to be the drunk person in the corner. Yeah, it's exactly the same. So you need to, you skill them up, train them, and then trust them, and go. You don't want a nanny state.
I think the other thing to bear in mind as well is it is really a balancing act, and you've got to sort of consider the fact that there is valuable data and content that is of value to your prospective customers, and if you make it available to them, then that's a good thing. Then you're servicing a need. If you don't make it available to them, they can probably go elsewhere and get a lot of it, or one of your competitors is going to give it to them. So I think you've got to strike that balancing act of making it easy for your buyers to get the information and the value-added information from your organization, but at the same time, obviously, you know, protect whatever proprietary things you need to protect. But just don't make it too difficult for a buyer, because that will drive them elsewhere, particularly if they can get that information, you know, from someone else. And generally, in our experience of working with organizations, I mean, that generally is what happens. You can go and get a lot of the information from other people. And all you've done in that case is that if I can't get it from you, but I have to go through my network and find it from someone else, now I'm just annoyed with you. Because I'm thinking, why didn't you just give it to me in the first place? It'd be so much simpler than I have had to go off and get it. And actually, your competitor has actually given me their information, so now I'm feeling that they're a little bit more kind of buyer-friendly than you are. So it really is a balancing act.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to add, Adam,
yes,
just
sure.
if I may. I'll give you a very simplistic framework for risk management that we do with our clients. It's a bit ugly, and it's not as spontaneous as we'd hope it'd be in social media, but I work with very large corporations that are scared heaps about risk and compliance. So one way is to have marketing become part of the social selling program and a required sign-off. And I think from our agency perspective, I've always felt that spontaneity in social media is always a dangerous thing. Somewhere along the line, spontaneity and shooting from the hip was prized, and maybe it is in a personal sense, but from a corporate sense where brands are worth billions of dollars, you can still be 100% authentic, but wait 3 or 4 hours for your statement to go out. Again, it's a bit ugly. It goes against our hope and ideals for social media being truly spontaneous, but for corporate brands that want to get out there and have their people have an authentic voice, marketing, curating content, signing off on content, even assisting social sellers with editorialization, but ultimately the social seller approving the final version and making it their voice and ensuring it's theirs is one way that you can actually mitigate risk, because marketing has usually has a channel focus, a compliance focus, a legal focus through their training. You can also bring compliance in and give them a content calendar. So actually give them ideas of the kinds of themes you want to discuss, and versions 1 basically of the things you want to say. Ultimately on the day or that week, you will have the actual version of what you're saying, and it's authentic, of course, but you've brought other divisions in. It makes it slower, but it's still effective. It's not spontaneous, but it's authentic. And for corporations that want to get stuck in, authenticity, in my opinion, is a lot more valuable than wanting to just think of something and shoot from the hip, which can be quite dangerous.
Another question.
I guess I've always seen a lot of application role for social media when it comes to B2C selling and consumer marketing. For us, we operate in the B2B space, and I've always, recently I've found it difficult to sort of identify the role of social media in that market. We sort of operate with a relatively small number of customers, so we're talking 200-300 customers and prospects. So
Sure. So I think a couple areas. I guess how LinkedIn is focused on B2B buyers. So a year and a half ago, we came out with a product specific to help B2B sales professionals, both in pipeline development and finding the right people to go after, as well as how you can best leverage not only your personal connection, but your company's connections. But I think the biggest component where it could help is the insights and the information. You saw some stats that were put up earlier, around 80%, what was it? 80% of the salespeople said they could be more effective if they had better insights and data. I would assume that the majority of these customers, given that over 80% of business professionals are on LinkedIn, and they're posting updates. Their companies are putting out information about what's happening with them. So this is arguably one of the best places to go and find out about what's happening within a company, who's coming and going, things that individuals are posting, what's front of mind with them. When it comes to networking or, say, multi-threading within an organization, might already be an established customer, but there's other people and stakeholders you haven't connected to, who those people are and how you can best connect to them through your own connections or through connections that your company has or that might exist from your existing relationships. But I think from an account management perspective, probably those two areas. So finding the right people, figuring out how to connect to them, seeing where those relationships, or having them actually bubble up to where you can see them. Your CEO is connected to the CEO of a client. You had no idea about the relationship. It's going to help accelerate your deal. It's going to help you get in to have a meeting quicker with the right stakeholders. It's going to help you get potentially introduced to a new division that you're trying to speak to, or this, wealth of information that's available not just on LinkedIn but other social spheres as well, to where you can learn more and more about your customer and get closer to your customer. Those are the main two areas where I think we're seeing organizations like yourself get the most benefit.
And the other thing is, I just go and ask your customers, because ask them what's valuable to them, what would they like to see you do differently. Are there different ways which they would like to get information or be connected? Because a lot of the times this is driven very much by the customer, and as we said earlier, it's really the buyer who's brought kind of B2C behavior into B2B buying. And so I would really encourage you to go and with some of your existing customers, just sit down and say, how do you use in social media? Are there ways in which we as your partner could service you better? Are there things that are important to you that in your decision-making process that we could give to you in different ways? So, I would let them be the guide.
I might wrap it up there just in time, because we are coming to the close of time. And one of the great things about social media is we have a Twitter feed going, and we also will get you some details around a blog so that you can keep the conversations going with the panellists and also other people that you've met here today, so it doesn't end now. And the other thing is also, I'm sure the panellists would love to, if you want to catch up with any of them, grab them as they come off the stage before they leave. So if you want to grab them, please do. What I'm going to do is just hand over to John for a couple of closing comments, and then what we'd like to do, because he's the author of our latest book, Winning the Battle for Sales, we're going to give some away and make the most of it whilst the author's here.
Yeah, just a few closing comments. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming here, and for those of you who've been ferociously tweeting during this, it's good to see that we're using the tools. Just in closing here, there's just a couple of things that we can refer to. In our latest research, you can see up there that there's 30% of businesses are posting for business purposes on a weekly basis, right? So 72% are using it to research, make connections, prospective buyers. So there's a lot of activity going on, but the problem is how to maximize that and how to make that actually actionable in your business. And that's the problem that a lot of businesses are facing. So the emerging trends that we are seeing through our research is social media is being used on a daily basis by most salespeople. As we've heard from the panel, it's not always effective. A lot of people are doing it because they think, wow, I better get involved, and they don't really know what they're doing. So so they're doing it, but whether they're doing it effectively is another thing entirely. And what they struggle with most is, how to message properly using the medium, right? I mean, a lot of salespeople are very effective in talking face to face on the phone. Over the years they've learned how to do it maybe effectively even through email, but then through the social media it becomes another challenge entirely. So again, it's really how to do it effectively, how to maximize the time, and it's all around discipline at the end of the day. And I think that's the one message that you take away from the panel today, is that it's definitely not about quantity. You heard, there's enough noise out there. We don't need to add to it. It's about discipline. It's about listening. It's about understanding, and it's really about being driven by what's important to your buyer and taking that as your guide. So that's our philosophy, is that you create a routine that fits into your existing sales process. So that's a good place to start, is how do I incorporate social media into my daily work practice as a salesperson? And then, how do I inspire and educate? So if I'm engaging with people, how do I bring something of value to them? So how do I give something, how do I not just engage, again, as I said, and cause noise, but how do I bring value to them? And so part of that process is listening and understanding what's important to your buyer. What are they talking about? What are they discussing? What are the business issues? What's going on in their market? So there's another part that we didn't really touch upon today, but it is essential that salespeople become much better researchers than they've ever been before, quite frankly, because you need to understand, from a business acumen point of view, you need to understand what's happening with your prospective buyer. You need to understand what's happening in their market, in their segment. What are the dynamics? What initiatives are ongoing in their organization? What have they been saying to their investors if they're a public company? So you really need to understand that, and then to take a listening brief as you go in and find out where they are and see what they're discussing, what they're talking about, and figure out what's of importance to them. So we at Huthwaite have developed this model for social selling, and that is, number one is search, and that's really go and find where are your buyers today. And I said one of the easiest ways to do it is actually talk to your current customers and find out, what do they use social media for? Where are they? What groups are they involved in? What do they use it for? What kind of information are they looking for? And go and find where they are. So go and attend if you take it in the digital world, like find this networking event, but find it online and find where it's full of all your prospects and current customers, and where they're discussing things that are pertinent and relevant to them. And then listen. As I said, that's one of the hardest things sometimes to teach rookie salespeople, as a lot of you who've run sales organizations know. Salespeople, some of them, they think that it's all about being gregarious and outgoing and, this great personality, so it's all about me talking loads. And your first thing to say is, no, hold on a second, time out. You want to listen, because at the end of the day, the value is going to come from listening to your buyer, and then asking the right questions and drilling down. So listen, and it's the same in the social selling world. So find where your customers or prospects are, then listen to what they're talking about, and then finally, share once you've got something of value to share. And as I said earlier, is remember my mother's advice: if you got nothing to say, don't say it, right? So don't just share stuff for the sake of it. Don't be that crazy person spouting nonsense. Really try and understand and make sure as you engage and as you insert yourself into the conversation that you're doing so in a valuable and in a value-creating way. So those of you who are familiar with what we do, I mean, you'll know that that's what it's all about in moving a sales process forward, is value creating at all stages of a sales process. And that doesn't change just because the media has changed, or because it's in a different environment now. It's still all about value creation and developing a conversation with the buyer, and drilling down and getting to a point where where they see value in actually engaging with you, with your products or your services, and solving a need for them. So that's where we've taken our latest research and built it into a model for social selling. So, and if you're interested in learning more, you can talk to Adam and Sarah and the other folks here afterwards. But in wrapping up, though, I would really like to thank all of you for coming out this morning, getting up early and taking time out of your busy schedules to come to a session like this. We're highly appreciative of it. I'd like also to thank our panelists. I mean, it's great. It's great when you have a panel of people who have lots of different perspectives, rather than sort of, 6 people sitting there all agreeing with each other. So I think you all have got a lot of good insights out of that. I know I have. I know I took some personal notes myself, and you continue to follow the Twitter feed. And I would encourage you to, again, not take this as an isolated event, but make sure that you, join in the conversation on Twitter. You'll also be invited onto a group on our LinkedIn group that will be specifically dedicated to this conversation, because, I believe that there is as much knowledge and information out there amongst all of you in the room as there is here on the stage. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this whole media, is that it does really enable us to learn from each other in a way that maybe was previously not available to us. And it's an emerging area. I mean, that's the great thing as well. There are really, we've all talked about, like, what are the right things to do, what are the rules. I mean, those are kind of evolving. So it'll be great to be able to continue the conversation and to share some of the insights and experiences that all you guys have going forward. So I would encourage you to continue the discussion. You got feedback forms on your table in good old hard copy form. So just to say, that we're not abandoning the traditional approach completely yet. I would really encourage you to fill that out, because it really helps us in continuing to make sure these events are as valuable as possible. And then I think there is Laura here. Has got I thought it was full of alcohol. No, it's only cards, obviously.
It's not. Oh.
Okay. And the first winner is Victoria Servoso. Is that right? Have I pronounced that right? Oh, okay, cool. You've won a book. The next one. I always find this really pressuring because of my past history of mispronouncing names. I'm under intense pressure. Stephen Kramer. Stephen, okay, excellent. Now you see they're just messing with me, because the original name on this card is crossed out and a completely different name is written in. Jenny Denenville. Have I completely? Oh, there. What is the proper pronunciation? Yeah, I was only about 4 miles away from that. Okay, all right. Marta James. Excellent. And is this last one? Okay. And last and by no means least, Brooke Mode. Was I right? Mod? There you go. 50-50 chance, so that's why I won't be going to the casino, because I put everything on red and it ended up on black. Okay, just before we finish today, just like to thank one more person, and that's Laura with the big bucket over here, who is actually responsible for putting this whole event together, along with the folks in our Huthwaite Melbourne office. So I'd like to give everyone a round of applause to Laura and our panelists, please.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we look forward to reading the Twitter feeds and the blogs. Thank you for your time.